Dude, can you even hear me over this noise? Yeah, it's me. I know, it's been forever since I've been to a place like this. Feels like another lifetime. Listen, the reason I called it's over. Me and Phoebe, we're done. No, man, just hold on. It wasn't cheating. There was no big fight, no screaming. It was quieter than that. And way weirder, she just forgot. After everything, after the accident, the recovery, all of it. She forgot it was me. She stood up at her own goddamn welcome back party and told this beautiful story about her survival, and I wasn't even in it. It's like I was a ghost for the past year. And the craziest part, I've never felt so relieved in my entire life. It's funny, looking back, the signs were always there, I just didn't want to see them. Or maybe I just called them by different names. I called it romantic, creative, her just being her. I didn't call it what it was, a full-time job curating a life that only existed on a screen. Our relationship to Phoebe was a story she was constantly writing, and I was a main character, sure, but she was the one holding the pen. I remember this one time early on, I was pulling a brutal double shift at the warehouse, just dead on my feet. I grabbed some greasy takeout on the way home, the kind of cheap noodles that barely come in a real container. I got to her place and she was already in her pajamas, looking all cozy. I just handed her the bag, kissed her forehead, and practically passed out on her couch. The next morning, I wake up to my phone buzzing. It's a notification. Phoebe had tagged me in a post. There was this beautifully filtered photo of the noodle box, artfully arranged next to a single candle she must have lit herself. The caption: "He drove across town after a soul-crushing day just to bring me this little box of magic. In a world of grand gestures, sometimes it's the quiet, resilient love that screams the loudest." My hero late-night savior. My friends were liking it, her friends were commenting with heart emojis, and me, I just stared at it. Drove across town, I lived 10 minutes away. Little box of magic, it was lukewarm chow mein, man, but I didn't say anything. How could I? I tried once early on to gently correct some minor detail in one of her stories. She told our friends I'd written her a poem when I just scribbled a funny line from a show we liked on a napkin. When I later said, "Babe, it wasn't really a poem," she looked at me with these wounded eyes and said, "Why do you have to ruin things?" It was a beautiful moment. I felt like such an asshole, like a boring, literal-minded jerk, so I learned my lesson. It was easier to just play along. I liked the post. I even commented with a stupid heart emoji of my own. This became the pattern. Our entire life was a series of photo ops waiting to be spun into a narrative. We took a weekend trip to the coast once, and it rained the entire time. We were stuck in a damp, musty motel room watching bad TV. I remember being bored out of my mind. Her version on Instagram, a black and white photo of rain on the window pane with the caption, "Trapped by the storm, we found a world in each other." Sometimes the best adventures are the ones that force you to be still. #soulmates rainy day romance. I bought her a heavy-duty winter coat because she was always complaining about being cold. Practical, right? For her, it became a symbolic embrace, a shield against the world that he wrapped me in. Every gift, every date, every mundane moment had to be imbued with this epic, cinematic meaning. I thought I was being a good, supportive boyfriend. I told myself it was a harmless quirk, her way of seeing the beauty in things. In reality, I was just letting her build this perfect, fake little world around us, and I was holding the damn ladder for her. I loved her, or at least I loved the her I thought was under all that performance, so I accepted the role she gave me. I just never realized the part was expendable supporting actor until it was too late. I let her be the sole author of our story for so long, I shouldn't have been surprised when she eventually wrote me out of it completely. Then came the call. The one that splits your life into a before and after. I was at the warehouse just clocking out, my mind already on what we were going to have for dinner. I was literally debating the merits of pizza versus tacos when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. A calm, official-sounding voice on the other end, the kind of calm that makes the hair on your arms stand up, said there had been an accident. That Phoebe was involved. Man, it's not like in the movies. Your brain doesn't just process it. It's like the sound cuts out and you're watching a scene from a distance. The words "car accident," "serious," and "St. Jude's Hospital" just floated in the air like poison smoke. I don't remember saying goodbye. I don't remember grabbing my keys. The drive there is a blur of red lights I probably ran and the frantic, desperate prayer of a guy who isn't even religious, just saying, please be okay, please, over and over again. The next thing I knew, I was in that sterile, too bright hospital waiting room. The air tasted like fear and bleach. I was just pacing, this hollow pit in my stomach, watching other families with their own quiet tragedies. Finally, a doctor with exhaustion etched around his eyes came out and said my name. He told me she was alive, and the relief was so intense it almost buckled my knees. I sagged against a wall, gasping for air I didn't realize I was holding. But then came the but. Multiple fractures in her leg, 2 broken ribs, a bad concussion they were monitoring closely. A long, uncertain road to recovery. In that moment, standing there under the humming fluorescent lights, none of the uncertain part mattered. All that mattered was that she was alive. I remember looking through the small, square window in her ICU door, seeing her lying there, so still and pale, dwarfed by the machines and tubes. The woman who curated every moment, who lived in vibrant color, was just shades of white and blue, and I heard the steady beep of her heart monitor. Beep, beep, beep. That sound was the only thing in the universe that mattered, and I made a promise right there just to myself. It wasn't dramatic or loud, it was just this quiet, solid thing that settled deep inside me. I was going to get her through this, whatever it took, for however long it took. The curated Instagram life, the embellished stories, all that bullshit just evaporated. This was real. And I was ready to do whatever it took to get my Phoebe, the real Phoebe, back. That promise became my entire world. The first few weeks were a blur of hospital visits, navigating insurance paperwork, and learning a language I never wanted to know, words like non-weight-bearing and physical therapy protocols. I convinced my boss at the warehouse to let me switch to the night shift, a brutal, soul-crushing schedule that nobody wanted, because it meant my days were free for her. Free to be there when she woke up, to help her with the breakfast she had no appetite for, to read to her for hours when the concussion made screens unbearable, to just sit and hold her hand when the pain got bad and she'd start to cry. When she was finally discharged, our apartment transformed. It stopped smelling like her lavender candles and started smelling like antiseptic wipes and chicken broth. The living room, once her pride and joy for hosting wine nights, became a physical therapy zone. The stylish coffee table was crammed into a corner, replaced by a cold metal walker and a set of resistance bands. My life shrunk to the size of her needs. I became her nurse, her cook, her chauffeur, her everything. My days were a meticulous schedule of her recovery. 8 a.m. meds. 8:30 a.m. help her to the bathroom, a slow, painful shuffle. 9 a.m. breakfast, which I had to coax her to eat, bite by bite. 10 a.m. stretching exercises, her face contorted in a mask of pain. And on it went. I learned how to change the dressings on her surgical scars, an act of intimacy that felt both profound and deeply unnerving. I learned how to give her sponge baths, preserving her dignity as best I could while my back screamed in protest. My own world just faded to black. I missed my best friend's 30th birthday party. I saw the pictures on social media later, all my friends, laughing, raising a glass. I was sitting on the edge of the tub, washing Phoebe's hair. The guys would call, "Hey Owen, wanna grab a beer? The game's on." And I'd look at Phoebe, asleep in her chair, and say, "Can't man, gotta help Phoebe with her exercises." Or, "She's having a rough day, I can't leave her." After a while, the calls became texts, and then the texts stopped coming as often. I didn't blame them. My life wasn't my own anymore. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror one day and barely recognized the guy staring back. I'd lost weight, my face was gaunt, and I had these permanent, dark circles under my eyes. I was a ghost haunting the hallways of my own apartment. But in a weird, twisted way, it felt real, more real than any of her Instagram posts. This was love, I thought, not the curated, filtered kind, but the messy, difficult 3 a.m. kind. This was the foundation, the stuff that forges a bond that can't be broken. Every small victory was a shared, electric triumph. The first time she could wiggle her toes, the first time she stood on her own for 10 seconds, leaning her entire weight on me, her breath hot on my neck. I was there for every single one. I was her rock. This, I told myself, was what mattered. It was during one of those long, pain-filled afternoons with the blinds drawn against the harsh sunlight that the seed was planted. She was drifting in and out of a nap, her face tight with discomfort. She started murmuring something I couldn't quite catch. I leaned in closer. "His voice," she whispered, her eyes still closed, fluttering. It was so calm, like in the movies. The world was just screaming metal, and then his voice. I asked her who she was talking about, stroking her hair. "The man at the crash," she said, her words slurring from the meds. "The paramedic. He held my hand through the broken window. He told me to hang on." A few days later, she was more lucid. She brought it up again. "I wish I could remember his face," she said, staring at the ceiling. "I think his name was Damien or something like that. He said, 'I'm not leaving you.'" I just nodded along, thinking it was a mental comfort, a fantasy her brain had cooked up to cope. "Babes, you were on a lot of medication," I said gently. "Let's just focus on you getting better, okay?" I was her reality, the one right there, cleaning her wounds day in and day out. I never imagined a half-remembered voice from a moment of chaos could ever compete with that. I was trying to ground her in the present, in her actual recovery. I had no idea I was just dismissing the main character of the new story she was already writing in her head. Then her sister, Stella, came to visit. Stella is, well, she's like the director's cut of Phoebe, even more dramatic, even more invested in appearances. She swept into the apartment, not with a casserole, but with a bouquet of expensive, impractical lilies and a cloud of judgmental perfume. She took one look at me unshaven, wearing the same sweatpants for the third day in a row, and gave me a tight, pitying smile. Then she turned her full attention to Phoebe, who was sitting up in her recliner, looking a bit more like her old self. "Oh, Phoebes, look at you," Stella cooed, ignoring me completely. "You're a fighter, I always knew it." I was in the kitchen making tea, and I could hear every word. Phoebe, her voice still a little weak, started telling Stella the story of the paramedic. His voice, Stella, it was the only thing that kept me from giving up. I expected Stella to be like me, to be rational. To say, "Wow, that's crazy, but Owen has been amazing, right?" Nope, Stella's eyes went wide. She clasped her hands together like she was watching the finale of a romance movie. "Oh my God, Phoebe, that is the most romantic thing I have ever heard. It's fate, a literal guardian angel sent to you in your darkest hour." I almost dropped the kettle. I stood there frozen, listening as my role in this whole ordeal was being systematically erased. "I know, right?" Phoebe said, her voice gaining strength from the validation. "I keep trying to remember his face." "Don't you dare," Stella said, wagging a finger. "He's better as a beautiful mystery, a symbol. It just proves what I've always said about you, Phoebes. You have this incredible spirit that just attracts cinematic moments. Of course you'd be saved by a faceless hero. It's your story." I walked back into the living room, holding 2 mugs of tea. Stella glanced at me, then back at Phoebe, and said with a little laugh, "It's so good to see you getting your spark back. You were made for more than just this." She made a vague gesture that seemed to encompass the walker, the pill bottles, and me. And in that moment, I wasn't a rock. I wasn't a caregiver. I was just this. The boring, uncinematic reality she needed to transcend. Stella's words were the fertilizer for the seed that was already planted, and I had to stand there and watch it grow. 6 months after the accident, Phoebe was basically her old self. The walker was gone, the limp was barely noticeable, and she was planning a party. A rebirth day party, she called it. A celebration of her recovery. I was all for it. I thought it would be a chance to finally close this chapter, to thank all our friends for their support, and to get back to some semblance of a normal life. I was a fool. I did everything for that party. I spent 2 days deep cleaning the apartment, erasing any last trace of its time as a sick room. I went to 3 different grocery stores to get all the ingredients for her favorite foods. I spent the entire day of the party in the kitchen, cooking, arranging platters, making sure everything was perfect. I was exhausted, but I was happy. She was happy. She was buzzing around, directing me on where to put the decorations, looking radiant in a new dress. It felt like we'd made it. Our friends started arriving, filling the apartment with laughter and life. Everyone was hugging Phoebe, telling her how amazing she looked. I was playing host, grabbing people drinks, refilling bowls of chips. At one point, her friend Jessica cornered me by the kitchen. "You're a saint, Owen," she said, squeezing my arm. "Seriously, I don't know how you did it." I just shrugged it off, feeling a little embarrassed but also seen. For a second I felt seen, then Phoebe clinked a glass for attention. The room went quiet. She was standing in the middle of the living room, glowing. "I just want to thank you all for coming," she began, "and I want to share something with you all. People have asked me how I got through this, what kept me going in the darkest moments." She paused for dramatic effect. I was standing near the back by the counter I just finished wiping down, and I smiled. I thought, this is it. "This is the moment," she says. "Owen was my rock." "The truth is," she continued, her voice thick with emotion, "I had an angel. When I was trapped in that car, I thought it was over. And then a voice cut through the chaos. A paramedic. I don't know his name, I don't know what he looked like. But he held my hand and he promised me he wouldn't leave me. In the hospital, in all those lonely, painful nights, it was the memory of that promise that I held onto. It was the thought of that stranger, that hero, that gave me the strength to fight." She went on, painting this beautiful, moving picture of her struggle, with this faceless paramedic as her co-star. The room was silent, captivated. People were tearing up. My own sister looked at me with this "wow, how romantic" expression on her face, and I just stood there, holding a tray of mini quiches that were getting cold. I looked at her shining, earnest face, and I felt nothing. It wasn't anger, it wasn't rage. It was like a switch being flipped off deep inside me. The part of me that had been running on fumes on love and commitment for the last 6 months just went silent. It was all a story. A better story, and I wasn't in it. I had been the stagehand for her one-woman show, and now that the performance was over, I was supposed to just disappear into the wings. In that moment, surrounded by a room full of people, I had never felt so completely and utterly alone. I didn't say a word, I didn't cause a scene. What was the point? Arguing would just make me look like a jealous, petty man trying to steal the spotlight from a woman celebrating her survival. Her story was better. It was cleaner, more romantic. My story was about dirty bandages, bedpans, and the bone-deep weariness of watching someone you love in constant pain. No one wants to hear that story at a party. So I just put the tray of quiches down on the counter. I looked at the happy, teary-eyed faces of our friends, all of them mesmerized by her tale. I looked at Phoebe accepting hugs, the triumphant survivor, and I quietly turned around and walked into our bedroom. The air in there was still and quiet, a world away from the party outside. I didn't slam the door, I just closed it softly. I grabbed the backpack I used for the gym, the one that had been sitting in the corner of the closet for 6 months, collecting dust. I didn't pack much, a few t-shirts, a pair of jeans, my toothbrush, my phone charger, the essentials. I looked around the room at all the things that had made up our life together. It all felt like a movie set I was seeing for the first time. I walked back out through the kitchen. The party was still going strong, no one even noticed me. I took my keys out of my pocket, slid the apartment key off the ring, and placed it squarely in the center of the kitchen island, right next to the bowl of dip I had made that afternoon. Then I walked to the front door, opened it, stepped out, and closed it behind me. The click of the latch was the loudest sound in the world. I walked down the hall, down the stairs, and out into the cool night air. I got in my car, drove to the cheapest, most anonymous motel I could find on the highway, and paid for a room in cash. I went inside, locked the door, and for the first time in half a year, the only person I had to take care of was me. I shut my phone off. The silence was deafening, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. The next morning, I turned it back on. I had one message to send. I opened my texts to Phoebe, my fingers feeling strangely steady. I wrote, "I've moved out, all the best." Then I blocked her number. I blocked her on every social media platform. I blocked Stella, I just erased them. It wasn't a grand, angry gesture, it was just housekeeping. My story was finally my own again, and it was time to clean up. It's been a few weeks now. I'm staying on my buddy's couch until I figure out my next move. The first few days were weird. I kept waking up at 3 a.m., my body still wired for her medication schedule, and I'd just lie there in the dark, listening to my friends snore in the next room. But last week, I did something I hadn't done in almost a year. I went down to the basement and dusted off my old surfboard. It was buried under a pile of junk I'd meant to throw out. The board felt foreign in my hands, but familiar at the same time. This morning, I drove out to the coast. The sun was just coming up, painting the sky in these insane shades of orange and pink. The air was cold and sharp with salt. I zipped up my wetsuit, waxed the board, and just waded out into the water. The shock of the cold was brutal, but it was a clean kind of pain. It woke me up. I paddled out past the break, my muscles screaming in protest. I sat on my board for a long time, just floating, watching the waves roll in. I wasn't thinking about Phoebe or the party or the paramedic. I wasn't thinking about anything. I was just there. Then I saw a wave forming, a good one. I turned the board, started paddling hard, felt the powerful shove as the wave caught me, and then I was up. Flying across the water, the spray hitting my face, the whole world just a blur of blue and gold. It probably only lasted 10 seconds, but it was everything. When I finally kicked out of the wave and tumbled into the churning water, I came up sputtering and laughing, genuinely laughing. And as I floated there on my back, the sun warming my face, this huge, stupid grin plastered across it, I felt it. This incredible, unbelievable lightness. It wasn't about her. It wasn't about revenge or who was right or wrong. It was the simple, glorious feeling of a weight being lifted off my shoulders. I was free, and I had a whole ocean to myself.